Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a quick video, or I'll try and make it as quick as possible, on some beginner tips for learning how to drift on a sim or game, whatever you want to call it, on a steering wheel. So this is going to be pretty universal across a range of games, say CarX, Forza, Assetto. Most of these tips are going to be pretty general across the board, so they should work in pretty much whatever sim you're trying to play. Now, first things first, which will be different in each sim, the wheel setup and force feedback setup is going to be one of the first things you need to do. CarX is very simple to set up, normally around 0.5, 0.6 force feedback scale is a really good starting point. You just want to make sure you have the steering assists off and you have 0 dead zone and 1.0 linearity. Very basic, very easy to set up, and the force feedback is quite good on CarX. It's quite responsive and nice and smooth. So that out of the way, and obviously, like I said, that's not going to be the same for each sim. Forza has quite a complex force feedback system. AC is a little bit more simple, but there's still quite a few more options on there as well. But I'm not going to touch on that because that's a whole other topic. So today we're just going to be, oops, I don't want to exit the game. We're just going to be talking about how you should approach it and a couple of general tips to learn how to understand how to control the car while it's in a drift. Now for this video we're going to be using this AE86, and we are using the drift setup. Now the only change I've made to this setup, and I'll just show you all, reset all the parameters, it's a stock tune. The only thing we're changing is we're lowering the tyre grip. Now lower tyre grip means we're going to have a slower car, which is really good for learning in, because the more grip you add to the car, the faster things are going to happen, which means you're going to need to be really quick reaction and response time to be able to manage the car. We don't want that when you're learning. You want it to be nice and smooth, slow and predictable, so you can get a feel for what you want to do, how to make the car do what you want it to, and get the start learning the muscle memory for piecing it all together. So we've got the wheel adhesion on 90. And that's it, that's all we're doing, just totally stock tune on the drift upgrade. Now the drift upgrade I would recommend, because it'll give you a little bit more power over the stock cars, and it'll give you a little bit more steering lock angle as well, which is very useful. You can learn in this completely stock tunes as well, but it is a little bit more challenging because you don't have as much power, and you can over rotate the car a lot easier because they won't be able to sort of catch higher angle because they just don't have that steering lock. So that being said, we're going to head to just a practice on the parking lot A. And first things first is learning to feel the force feedback. Now when we turn a corner, it's quite straightforward. We turn into the corner, we get a force feedback, force pushing the wheel in the opposite direction, trying to make the car go straight. And that force is the same thing when drifting. So as we turn the wheel, we get a countering force, and this is because as we turn the wheel, we're making the car produce a slip angle on the front tyres to rotate around the arc of a corner. And we do the exact same thing when we're drifting. We're still holding a tension in the wheel to prevent the wheel from over rotating, and we're still turning the car around an arc. It's just that the rear tyres have a much greater slip angle than the front tyres. Now I'll try not to use too technical words and keep it simple, but what we're doing is we're just focusing on the tension in the wheel. So when we turn a corner, we can feel that tension. Same thing when you drift. You don't want to just let the wheel go all the way because it will overcorrect. And you will most likely spin out. So if we get just a small drift going, if we let the wheel rotate too far, the car is going to rotate extremely quickly. So we just want to make sure we're keeping the tension in the wheel and not allowing it to rotate to full lock and make the car whip in the opposite direction. And this is where we start sort of getting a feel for the balance of the car, how to use the throttle and the steering combined. So when you're in the drift, say we're going around a left-hand corner, the drift is we're basically counter steering to the right, but we're still turning the car to the left. We're still forcing the wheel to move left as we're following that arc around the corner. Now, when you're using the steering wheel, and this is pretty much exactly the same way the controller assist works, is instead of the wheels returning to center whenever you let go of the joystick, they follow the self-aligning force of the tyres. So when the car's sideways, the wheels are trying to make the car straighten up. So that's why in CarX you're actually still turning into the direction of the corner, because you're still trying to get the car to rotate around that arc of the corner. Whereas on Forza you countersteer into the drift, which is a little bit unrealistic, because what we do on the steering wheel is exactly what the controller assist does. We're still turning the car into the corner and preventing the car from straightening up. Now, you've got to learn to feel where that balance point is and feeling the tension. If you overcorrect, the wheel will get lighter and the car's going to change direction quite quickly. And obviously, the more gas you feed in, the more wheel slip you're going to have. More wheel slip means it's going to rotate into the direction of the corner more, and less wheel slip means it's going to try and straighten up. But it is a balancing act between the two. You can have basically both of them counteract each other, so to speak. So you got to learn to feel where that balance point is and start getting the muscle memory together and getting the intuition to how to get the car to stay in drift and sort of do what you want it to do. And that's the main thing you need to practice. Now, the other thing we can do is when learning how to transition, it's a really good tip, is if you use, I recommend using a view like the cockpit view without the drift camera turned on, because you get a nice fixed position. You can tell exactly where the angle of your car in relation to the track that you're on, but also it gives you a really good reference for the horizon. So when we turn a corner, the horizon moves at a constant rate, and pardon me, it's the same thing when you drift. When you're in a drift, the horizon moves at a constant rate, but when the car gets ready to change direction, the horizon stops, and that is a critical point where you can understand what the car is doing and how to adjust and make it do what you want it to do at that point. So we'll show you that again. So as we drift, the horizon is moving across the screen, and as the horizon stops, the car is preparing to change direction. So just using that movement is a really good reference point in understanding what the car's about to do. And at that point we can either just let the steering lock as it is. If we stay on the throttle, the car's going to transition. If we stay on the throttle too much, it's going to over-rotate. So normally you just want to lift off the throttle a little bit during the transition to give it a little bit of grip so it doesn't over-rotate. But then again, like I said before, it's a combination of steering and throttle inputs to balance the car. So we can overcorrect at that point and it's going to do the same thing, or we can turn into the direction of the corner more and it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to slow the car rotation down. So as we turn the wheel straight, you can see the car didn't want to transition because I'm basically straightening the car up. And that's something you need to just have a play with. You'll get a feel for it. Some people might pick it up really quickly, other people it might take a bit of practice. And like I said, we're just using the stock tune, and the stock tune is more than capable of drifting on CarX. You don't need a fancy tune to be able to slide the car, and the stock tune is actually really easy and quite fun to drive, especially on a wheel setup. So we'll do a couple of drifts here. I don't really know where everything's positioned, so we're just sort of freeballing it. Ooh, that's a van. That's bad. See that you don't need a tune to be able to drift smoothly. As long as you've got power and a decent amount of steering lock, you'll be able to slide the car pretty damn smoothly. The default tunes are not bad at all on this game. Not gonna make that. Yeah, so because we're using basically the slip angle range of the tyres, CarX does have quite a large slip angle on their tyres, so you can apply quite a bit of steering input even on the high steering lock angle before the car will start to understeer or push the limits of the tyre. So at low speeds we can pretty much turn the wheel 180 degrees in one direction before the tyres are sort of at their limit, and that's sort of what you want to reference when you're in a drift. You don't need to be turning the wheel super radically. You want to try and be smooth within that range of slip angle in both directions. So a good technique that I always used was trying to keep my hands in a constant position, and then don't focus too much on where the wheel rotates to, just feel it and then feel for the tension in the wheel. So when you keep your hands in a constant position, you can focus more on just steering the car rather than trying to focus on where your steering wheel is. Now if you don't have a handbrake and you have to use a paddle, that is going to be a little bit of something that you do need to keep track of, where the wheel position is, so you can grab the handbrake if you need it, if you're using a paddle. But if you have obviously my handbrake doesn't work on this at the moment, I have to use the button on down here. If you have a handbrake that's separate from the wheel rim, it will make things a lot easier. You won't need to really focus on where the wheel is to be able to grab the right paddle or whatever it is you're going to be using. And another thing too is the rotation angle of the wheel is not super important when you're learning. I would recommend a minimum of 540. You don't really want to go any lower than that, especially if you're running the drift angle kits, because it's going to make the cars more twitchy, and you kind of want to be as smooth as possible. So the higher the rotation, the smoother everything is going to be. But obviously you still need to learn how to balance the car correctly. But there's no harm in starting off on a lower rotation until you sort of get the feel for it, and then sort of increasing it as you go, as you get more comfortable. And that's the big thing. You need to make sure that you're comfortable with what you're using. If you don't like using cockpit view, don't use it. Use what you are comfortable with. If you don't want to use 900, you want to use something else, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I can't stress enough that being comfortable in the car is more important than, you know, that's pretty much it. You just need to be comfortable with your setup in the car. And when I say your setup, I mean your steering wheel, not the tune. So like I said before, the tune is not super important. The tune is really just for once you're at the level where you can drift really smoothly and control the car and put it where you want it to be. Tuning then will help you dial the car in and change its behaviour at certain angles and things like that. It's not going to drastically change how the car performs, it's just going to slightly change its characteristics, and it's basically just to fit the driver is what the tuning does. It's not going to make the car, 50% better. The tyre grip is still going to be the same tyre grip and things like that. It's just changing the balance of the car and adjusting how much certain things will change it, whether you want the car to be more understeery, so you have to use more throttle, or less steering, and vice versa, or whatever it is. That's really what the tuning is for, but you do not need a tune to be able to drift the cars. It can be super smooth. Just like that. Just a bit of a correction there. But the more you practice, the more you're going to get a feel for it, and you'll understand, what the car's doing and how to make it do what you want to do. And that's the goal. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, give it a like, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!